In 1961, Belgium killed Congo's first prime minister. Not in battle, not by accident. They dissolved his body in acid. And for 60 years, the man who did it kept a piece of him in a drawer. A tooth, kept for 60 years. Not a museum relic, not a lab sample. A souvenir, pulled from a murdered leader's mouth by the same officer who destroyed the rest of his body. This isn't rumor or internet legend. It's in the official record of a Belgian parliamentary inquiry. Let's go back to where it started. June 1960. The Congo was free. 80 years of Belgian rule ended in a single ceremony in Leopoldville. King Baudouin of Belgium stood at the podium and praised his own country's record in the Congo, speaking as if 80 years of forced labor and broken promises had simply never happened. Then a 34-year-old man named Patrice Lumumba stood up and refused to play along. He spoke plainly about what colonial rule had actually cost his people: forced labor, daily humiliation, decades of being treated as strangers in their own country. The room went cold. Within weeks, the men he had just embarrassed were already planning his removal. Declassified American records later confirmed it. A sitting U.S. president personally authorized a plan to eliminate him, and Belgium's own government was deep in that planning long before a single shot was ever fired. The Congolese army mutinied. The mineral-rich province of Katanga declared its own independence, backed quietly by Belgian money and Belgian officers. Katanga sat on cobalt, copper, and uranium, the same minerals that had made Belgium one of the wealthiest small nations on Earth, and the same minerals that powered factories and weapons programs across the Western world. Belgian paratroopers landed within days, faster than any United Nations peacekeeper could arrive. Lumumba asked the UN for help. It came too slowly and with too many conditions. So he turned to the Soviet Union instead. In the middle of the Cold War, that single phone call sealed his fate in both Washington and Brussels, turning a domestic political crisis into something far more dangerous. A Cold War liability that powerful men decided was easier to remove than to manage. Within months, the man Belgium once called a problem was dismissed from office by men who used to answer to him. Men who understood that staying loyal to him now meant losing everything Western governments were offering instead. By September, he was under house arrest in his own home. Soldiers posted outside his own windows, his phone line cut, his movements tracked by the same army he had once commanded. By January 1961, he had slipped away once and was caught again at a checkpoint, miles from safety. He was flown straight into Katanga, the one province that wanted him dead the most. Witnesses later said he was beaten on the plane, in front of the same men assigned to guard him. On January 17, 1961, he was driven into the bush outside Elizabethville. A firing squad was already waiting, rifles raised in the pale morning light of a clearing far from any road, any witness, any chance of rescue. Belgian officers stood at the edge of the clearing and watched it happen. Patrice Lumumba was 35 years old. For almost 40 years, the official story was simple. Congolese rivals did it, and Belgium had nothing to do with any of it. That story held, until one old man decided he was done keeping it. In 1999, a former Belgian police commissioner named Gerard Sout sat down for a television interview, decades older now, speaking in the flat, almost bored tone of a man finally unloading a secret he'd carried his whole life. He had been stationed in Katanga in January 1961. Almost casually, he explained how he'd been ordered to make Lumumba's body vanish completely. No grave, no evidence, nothing for history to ever dig up. So he used acid, sulfuric acid, brought in by the drum, to dissolve the remains of a head of state. Then he said the one thing that froze the entire country watching, the detail no one had ever expected to hear from a retired police officer on a quiet evening broadcast. Before the acid finished its work, he had pulled 2 teeth from Lumumba's skull with a pair of pliers, and kept them, for nearly 40 years, in a drawer, as a personal trophy. The confession detonated across Belgium and the Congo. In 2001, the Belgian parliament opened a formal inquiry into the killing. In 2002, the government issued an official apology, admitting moral responsibility for the assassination, the kind of carefully worded statement designed to close a chapter without ever opening a courtroom. But an apology buries nothing. No one was ever prosecuted. Sout died before he could face a single charge. And the tooth, The only physical trace of Patrice Lumumba left anywhere on the planet was still missing somewhere inside his family's hands. For 61 years, his children could not bury their father. No body, no grave, no headstone, just a family waiting on a fragment of bone to come home, raising their own children, growing old themselves, while the one piece of physical proof that their father ever existed sat locked in a stranger's drawer across the ocean. In 2016, Belgian investigators finally located the tooth, still kept in the home of Sote's own daughter, tucked away among old family belongings as if it were nothing. It took 6 more years of legal battles, family pressure, and international embarrassment before Belgium agreed to let it go. 6 more years of lawyers, court filings, and a daughter who refused to stop asking for her father's tooth back. In June 2022, inside a quiet room in Brussels, a Belgian official placed a small box into the hands of Lumumba's daughter. Inside was the tooth. 61 years after his murder, that single tooth was the closest thing to a body his family would ever receive. It was flown to Kinshasa. The Congo gave Patrice Lumumba a state funeral for a tooth. Streets filled with mourners who had never met him, carrying photographs of a man most of them weren't even alive to see, chanting his name as if he had only just died. He was finally laid to rest in a mausoleum built in his name, 61 years after he was promised independence and given a bullet instead. 61 years. That's how long it took one tooth to travel from a Belgian drawer to a Congolese tomb. And it only happened because one old man couldn't resist telling the story on camera, decades after he thought it was buried for good. If he had stayed silent, there would be no inquiry, no apology, no tooth, nothing. The world would still believe Congolese rebels acted alone. That is what a 60-year cover-up looks like, right up until one confession cracks it wide open. The men who gave the order never sat in a courtroom. The country that armed the killers only ever said sorry. And the family of the man who freed the Congo spent 6 decades fighting just to bury a piece of his jaw. If this story made your stomach turn, that reaction is the only justice some families ever get. People refusing to let it disappear, refusing to scroll past it like it never happened. Comment the word tooth below if this is the first time you're hearing this, so the people who built this story can see how many of you it reached. Share it with someone who still thinks colonialism ended the day a flag came down, because most of them have never heard a word of this. Because silence is exactly what kept this buried for 60 years. Don't let it go quiet again. Not this time.